Hello and welcome to another edition of Critical Q&A, the show where I answer your questions based on what you've left for me in the comments section of my Q&A videos, or have sent to me by email at askchrisshelton@gmail.com. I wanted to say a little bit this week about the fact that I've got a lot of projects and things moving forward right now, which I kind of always tease with, but people have been waiting for the audiobook. It's got 3 short little chapters left to record, and then I will be compiling that. So I'm really looking at less than a week now to get that out finally, because man, some of those chapters are beefy and took a long time to put together and record. So anyway, that's happening, and also the metering video, the e-meter video. I might have mentioned before that I really intend for that to be a very comprehensive video, and I'm actually doing research on a couple points right now. I've got an outline, I've got certain parts of it scripted out, but it's going to be not just a little 10-minute video on here's what the meter does, because lots of people have done that, and they've had varying degrees of truth and varying degrees of nonsense connected with their efforts. It is an electronic device. We do know what it measures, but what about all those different reactions on the needle that it does, and that tone arm that goes up and down, and what's it really doing? What's really going on with that? And what do Scientologists think is going on with that? I have to explain all of that. So there's going to be a lot going into this video. So I just wanted to let you guys know why it's going so slow, is because I am taking the time to do it right, because I only want to do it once. So anyway, that's happening. So now let's go ahead and get on with your questions, because we've got a lot to cover this week. Katie lied. I'm sure that you're familiar with this quote by Martin Niemöller. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I use this quote because I have devout friends who are members of other religions who are muted in their response to Scientology's evils, because they feel that although Scientology is low-hanging fruit and easy to demonize, the anti-Scientology movement is populated not only with ex-Scientologists, but also with new atheists and others interested in wiping out all churches via loss of tax status and other government privileges. So members of other religions, who in my experience are among the first to mobilize against slavery, child labor, and lack of education, put up no challenge to Scientology because it is a bulwark against attacks against all churches in general. I'm interested in your thoughts here because you are vehemently against Scientology, but it is not clear that you're an atheist. Well, this is certainly a multifaceted question, and I'll try to give a short, to-the-point answer here, because this could spark a discussion that could go on for a very long time. I think other churches very definitely should be speaking out against Scientology, because they poison and sully the name of religion, as do many other groups that are classified as destructive cults or televangelists, or those kind of people who are blatantly, openly taking advantage of people for monetary gain. I don't think other churches should really have any back off in aligning with efforts to speak out against those kind of human rights abuses and financial abuses and physical abuses and whatnot that goes on in these groups. But I get your point about my enemy's enemy is not my friend, so to speak, right? Because churches would be feeling maybe that they shouldn't be aligning with atheists and things like that. I am not an atheist, and I've said that before. I will say that again. I don't identify as that. If anything, I identify as agnostic. I don't know. I don't think anybody else knows, and I think the whole discussion is absolutely silly. I think it's ridiculous that we even sit around talking about the nature and character of God, much less that some vast spiritual being in the sky who created all of us is somehow watching over football games or deciding who should win what war. I think it's ridiculous, and I don't want to have any part of any of that. So I say agnostic because the big I don't know is my answer to anything when it comes to that sort of thing. And I've expressed already that I have religious or spiritual hopes, but I don't call those beliefs because I don't think they're strong enough to be beliefs. Now, as far as your question of, should churches be aligning with the ex-Scientology community or with the atheist community or whatnot, I always feel sad when I see people, new atheists or old atheists, any atheists, or people who proclaim to be non-believers, who have an attitude about it. I think that intolerant attitude of non-believers toward people who have belief is wholly misplaced, very ignorant, and by ignorant I mean that it is intolerance is unacceptable to me. I think that the thing that we should be intolerant of is intolerance, right? There's nothing wrong with other people having their own spiritual or religious beliefs. However, that being said, I also do have to say that when you're in a position like I'm in, where I'm now investigating and looking into other destructive cults beyond just Scientology, when you see what's done in the name of belief and in the name of religion, it's horrifying. There's atrocities that are committed right now, right here in the United States, in the name of belief. And you mentioned in your question that people amongst the religious community who would speak out against and mobilize against slavery, child labor, and lack of education. And yet there are religious groups and cults, destructive cults, that are religious destructive cults that engage in physical abuse and child abuse in the name of religious belief. And it really stretches my ability to have tolerance toward belief when I see what some people do with those beliefs. It's a really tough question. Like I said, it sparks a very, very big discussion. So I guess, I think that my thoughts on this are that when it is clearly shown that any group, religious or not, is engaging in physical abuse, mental abuse, psychological abuse, human rights violations of its members, anyone should speak out against it. And it shouldn't become they're a religion and we're a religion, so we shouldn't speak out against them. I feel that's a fairly indefensible position because we're all human beings first. And I think that all of us who see these kinds of things going on have a duty as human beings to stand up for the rights of those people who are being persecuted or victimized and get them out of those situations. So that's my short answer to this very big question. Ah, indeed. Why isn't more attention given to the fact Tommy Davis is gone? Between the John Sweeney incident, Australian TV reports, CNN interview, and the taped conversation with Larry Anderson, I would think this would be more discussed amongst Scientology critics. I have to think there would be a line of people waiting to rub it in his face that Scientology seems to have not worked for him. Why isn't this examined more? Well, I'm not particularly standing in line to rub it into Tommy Davis's face that it didn't seem to work for him because he doesn't want to hear it. He's still a true believer, or at least that is the show or the facade that he presents to the world. And he does not accept communication from like Tony Ortega or people who are anti-Scientology. And he's got his own reasons for it, probably namely involved with his family, who are Scientologists, his mother and his father. And he was raised in Scientology. I don't know from how young, but knowing from my own experience how powerful of a force that can be to your own motivation and belief and how you act in life, it's going to take him time to get past that. And hopefully at some point in the future, he chooses to break free of it and speak out against it. But that's a big ask for somebody like Tommy Davis. He's married to Jessica Feshbach. The Feshbach family are all Scientologists, very active, very moneyed Scientologists. So, you got two powerful, moneyed families, Tommy's parents and Jessica's parents and family, and they're going to buck that system. It doesn't really sound like they're going to. Now, as far as a bunch of people waiting to criticize Tommy Davis, well, I think that's occurred. I think that he's received, warranted criticism for lying about disconnection and some of the other things that he said, where he sort of, put his foot in his mouth as a spokesman for Scientology. And I don't really know what else to say about the guy. He kind of did us a favor, those of us being in the ex-Scientology community, that he did say what he said, because he gave the world, the WOG world, those of us who are, not in Scientology, more ammunition to use against the church by lying about disconnection, by saying that if Dianetics, that he said apparently on public television that if everything that Hubbard said about his war record was a lie, then Dianetics would be based on a lie, and the whole thing would be a lie, which is true. In that Hubbard did lie about his war record. Dianetics is based on a lie, and all of it is, to that degree, a lie, right? So, thank you, Tommy, for doing that. That was great. So I don't know how much more face rubbing we really need to do. I think, and I'll comment on this right now, that I think that the fact that there hasn't been another international spokesman for Scientology since 2011, when Tommy disappeared, I think it was 2011, I think that is a more telling sign of the current state of Scientology than many other things. 5 years now that no one has been representing Scientology in the public eye. There have been press releases and written statements by Karen Powell, which we all pretty much believe is right out of David Miscavige's mouth. That's been Scientology's media presence, that and those stupid Super Bowl commercials, and that's it. So that should really tell you something, because, what does it say about, some organization that claims to have millions of members and yet can't seem to find somebody to be their spokesperson for mass media representation? It tells me that OSA has probably downsized massively. Nobody wants to go anywhere near that job. And plus, Miscavige, of course, is in such a state of whatever at this point that he's not putting anybody else on that job for 5 years. That is telling. That tells me that these guys are on a much more serious decline than is generally, maybe appreciated. We talk about their membership numbers, 20,000, maybe less. That's very telling. It's not a concrete number. We can't know for sure. But when you see other indications, like no public spokesperson and no mass media marketing or promotional campaigns, because those Super Bowl commercials certainly do not make up a PR campaign. That's a random act of promotion, is what that is. You're seeing an organization that is folding. They're pulling those flippers are being pulled in. And this group is heavily on the decline. So that's the good news for me about Tommy Davis, is that there hasn't been a replacement for Tommy Davis. So there you go. Preston. I was reading a comment by Echo1886 on Reddit, and he gave an example of how Scientology manipulates the definitions of words to terminate exits. I think I got that right. His example was the word reasonable. Have you already addressed the significance of hijacking that word? The most popular video that I've created so far has been the one called Scientology is Coming Apart at the Seams. And I think that's had like 150,000 views or something. And in that video, I talk about a very specific L. Ron Hubbard policy called propaganda by redefinition of terms, where he sort of takes a page out of George Orwell's materials and twists it around to use it in the worst possible way to redefine terms so that they purposefully mean something different, so as to create a different impression in people's minds. Hubbard talks about its use in propaganda and PR, and he says it can be used for good or for bad, and gives examples of that and whatnot, and I talk about that. But what Hubbard doesn't really talk about in that policy, but which is rampant throughout Scientology, is the redefinition of words, regular English words, so that they have whole new nuances and meanings. And they actually change the pattern of thinking of people as a result, because we think with words. We think with words that represent concepts, and those words and concepts that we use create thought processes that that become habit forming, and that's part of our psychology. And so the word critical, for example, is redefined in Scientology as a bad word. Being critical as a thinker is very, very bad. And the word reasonable. So let's talk about reasonable. That in Scientology means coming up with reasons or justifications or rationality for why something that is wrong is right. You see, it's a bad word. Being reasonable in Scientology is a bad thing. If you're reasonable in the real world, then you're open to discussion, and you're open to new ideas, and you're open to reason, right? Which is, of course, what I'm all about. But in Scientology, if you're reasonable, that's a very bad thing, because that means you're just the kind of person who comes up with reasons for something rather than just deal with the fact that you did something bad, or something is wrong, or something is, not the way that it should be. For example, in Scientology, if you had statistics, right? Everybody's got statistics. Everybody manages their job on statistics. And if somebody's production statistics were down, for a week or for 2 or 3 weeks or something, they were just going down, down, down. And the senior came along and said, "What's going on with this? And I'm gonna yell and scream at you now because your statistics are down, and punish you for this." And the person said, "Yeah, but look, I wasn't here half the time because I was on vacation, or my mom died and I went to the funeral, or something. Like, I just wasn't here to produce, and the stats went down." And in Scientology, the proper response to that would be, "Oh, you're just being reasonable. What, you expect me to be reasonable about your down statistics? I don't think so, right? Your stats are down, it's your fault, fix it," right? And that would be the attitude towards such a person, right? And if that senior went to his senior and said, "Yeah, his stats are down, but his mother died," his senior would say to him, "Quit being reasonable. Knock it off. This guy's out ethics, and his stats are down, and he needs to be punished, and he needs to get his stats up." Yeah, and that's how that would go. That's how that conversation would go. So that's how reasonable is redefined in Scientology. So nobody in Scientology, you're trained out of using that word in any other context. So you'll never hear a Scientologist say, "Well, let's be reasonable," right? Or, "Okay, hang on, let's have a reasonable conversation here," right? Or anything like that. All of those definitions of reasonable are phased out of your thinking because of this new definition. And it's the same thing with critical and with other key words in the English language, right? Those are the two that come to mind right away. So that's how that works in Scientology. Mandy Franks: "Wouldn't the Youth for Human Rights group be considered a child evangelism tool? I know they specifically say they don't target children for parishioners, but this clearly sounds like a children's outreach. A very well designed and constructed way to create contact and dialogue with children in a way that gets them, the audience, in a very neutral situation. Like you said, the human rights lessons aren't bad at all, but of course, I always think stress test, they will incorporate their message." Well, you have a point, but that is not what the Youth for Human Rights movement is used for, at least not to all of my knowledge about it. And I don't mean to be contrarian, because you're actually making a good point, and it would be a proselytizing, or what they would call dissemination factor, but it's really targeted to adults. The Scientology is not interested in getting children involved unless they're the children of parents who are going to pay them money. You have to keep in mind that Scientology is all about money. And so children thinking positively about Scientology doesn't really mean much to them. But children who think positively about Scientology so that their parents will then come in and start doing services and whatnot and paying money Now that they're all about. And the Youth for Human Rights is a little bit too extended. It's a little bit too far away from Scientology for that to really be used as much of a dissemination or evangelism or proselytizing tool. What they're trying to do with the Youth for Human Rights is they're trying to buy goodwill. They're trying to buy favorable press. They're trying to make themselves be positioned, the Scientology is trying to position themselves as being for human rights. And let's face it, they're doing that because Miscavige knows that he has created a reputation very much anti-human rights because of his authoritarian and abusive actions toward his peeps, toward his people, at management and all the way down the line. Scientology is an extremely abusive system that does not believe in or have anything to do with human rights. So they basically just use the Youth for Human Rights program as a song and dance or dog and pony show, facade to paint them in a favorable light. They say, well, see, we support this, right? But they don't support it because what they really do is they get their parishioners to get money donated for it. I don't think Scientology has really invested that much in the Youth for Human Rights program. I mean, they made some videos years ago, many years ago. They made a bunch of videos about, the precepts or the points from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights for children, and they're good PSAs. I'll still to this day say those are good PSAs. They weren't written by Scientology, well, they weren't written by the Sea Org as far as I know. They were written by an individual and his mother who actually started the whole Youth for Human Rights program. Mary Shuttleworth and her son were the ones who actually started it. Now, they are Scientologists, and the church heard about this. The Mary and her son made a music video, and they did that on their own. And then Scientology heard about this and went, and then they got him on board, went and made all these PSAs, and then they sponsored, right, Mary on her world tours, which really meant that they, got Scientologists to donate money so that she could go around and talk about human rights to a bunch of kids. And, I'm all for that. I can't say that that was a nefarious, dark, black-hearted thing to do. I think that was good work to do, and I think Mary and her son had a really good idea in translating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights into, something children could understand and teaching them about it. Hopefully, what that will really do is give those kids a foundation of human rights and an understanding of human rights so that when they look at Scientology and hear about what Scientology actually does to people, they'll stay the hell away from it and recognize that it's actually not something that is promoting human rights at all. And wouldn't that be just reward? So that's what I think. And it's time for Flash Answers. Mr. Harley Ryder. If Scientologists believe when they die they come back to serve the church per their billion-year contract, then why isn't Hubbard back and running the church? He would be 30 now and should be more than able to take over leadership of the church again. Or how do they explain why he isn't back? I really enjoy your channel. Keep up the great work. Well, Hubbard didn't come back because he's a liar and the whole reincarnation thing is a bunch of nonsense. But also, Hubbard actually wrote, you might have heard this issue, this bulletin that he wrote about being Lucifer and Jesus being a pedophile and all that. In that same issue, which was originally part of the OT8 materials, I don't think it still is, but it originally was, Hubbard also said in that issue that he wasn't coming back straight away, or that he was, at least not as a religious leader. He said he was going to come back as a politician. So maybe, I don't know, how old is Ted Cruz? Ms. Yoga Girl. How likely are Scientologists to seek mental health support once they get out, given that they've been told such horrible stories about psychologists, therapy, meds, etc.? I wish they were a little bit more reaching for it, because Scientology does instill a lot of fear about psychology and psychiatry, and it takes, unfortunately, too long for people who come out of Scientology to get over that in some cases. However, There are quite a few people I know who are ex-Scientologists who have gotten therapy or have seen counselors or psychologists or whatever, and that's really good, you know. And I hope more people will do that, because there is nothing wrong with seeing a counselor and getting some help. Alpha Lily, do you see some of the tech techniques being used by any of the presidential candidates? I thought Carly Fiorina and Ted Cruz were utilizing Scientology tech. Well, you know, I could go on for a long time about the various PR shenanigans that I see Republican and Democratic candidates engage in, but I don't think they're using Scientology techniques, at least not overtly and knowingly, although Scientology certainly utilizes a lot of PR techniques, so they certainly do cross over one another. An outcast. Hi Chris, I was wondering about the sense of guilt presence in the Scientology cult. Does a Scientologist believe that if he does not behave according to the Scientology principles, he will suffer any sort of supernatural consequences? For example, if a Scientologist takes a psychiatric drug or watches one of your videos, besides the actual risk of getting caught, does he perceive it as a form of sin? Xenu, L. Ron Hubbard, or any Scientologist God in the afterworld will punish him for. No, it doesn't really work that way. It's not, Scientology is not supernatural, sin-based. They do have this idea of when you do something wrong or bad, that you may pull in some kind of bad things toward you, but that's sort of a cliche for them. That's not like there's divine retribution or some sort of supernatural force that's going to punish you for your wrongdoing. Scientologists believe that the punishment you receive for wrongdoing is something that's self-inflicted. It's something that you sort of create yourself. So that's more of the philosophy on it. And with that, we have reached the end of our Q&A episode. Thank you very much for coming around. I really appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please put them in the comment section below. I see everything, and I am very interested in what you have to say about anything, and also all of your questions for me, Scientology related or otherwise, and I'll get to them as rapidly as I can. I'll see you guys next week.